This is great. Thank you for coming. It's an honor to just be able to speak in front of you about such important topics. I'm glad you're all here. Hi in the back. So my name is Christopher Wren. Do I have the slides? Can I have the slides, please? They asked me to introduce myself, so being from the East Coast, I'm going to do something I'm uncomfortable with, which is to talk about myself. So I'm Christopher Wren. The little letters after my name represent about a decade I spent at the MIT Media Lab studying the interaction between people and computers. And then after some time, I ended up at Google. And only about 4 years ago, I ended up getting an opportunity to join the Android team. So I work on this Android system UI. And I've done that for about 4 years. My first release was Jelly Bean. So that's pretty exciting. We're all the way up to Marshmallow now. And today I'm going to be talking about notifications, which is one of the things that the System UI team builds. And particularly, I'm going to be talking about how notifications affect people and how you should be thinking about how you're affecting your users. So having said all that introduction, I'm a little nervous about the graphic on the screen because I'm worried that people will think that like I'm on the mountaintop and I have all the answers. And I definitely do not. So put that out of your head. It's definitely the case that I'm climbing the same mountain as you. The way people use these devices, the way these devices are changing, and the way we interact with each other while we're using the devices is all changing rapidly right now. So we're all trying to figure it out. But I'm going to tell you what I think is currently the good stuff to do. So let's get to it. So the first thing, of course, I did, or the last thing I did before I got on stage here to talk to you about notifications was turn off my notifications. So, because wouldn't it be embarrassing if I was up here talking to you about how not to disrupt user attention and my phone went off? I certainly hope I actually remember to do that. That was in the script. But so being at don't do that. Being at a developer conference, obviously we're developers. We're thinking about the software. We're thinking about the device. We're thinking about APIs and editors. And that was a great thing this morning with the Instant Run. How many like Instant Run? Do you like that? Yeah, that's great. Okay. So we're obviously, our head is in the device. But I want you to pop out of that a little bit. So this talk is about what the devices are for. People will tell you they can't live without their phone. But what they mean is they can't live without the things that the phone connects them to, the people they love, the issues they care about, the places they miss. Right? So this has become a portal for us to other people and other places. And so that's important for you to remember. So this is sort of the backbone of the talk. There's like, who's sort of Maslow's pyramid of needs, right? So this is sort of my pyramid of needs for notifications. And at the top, but at the base, the first thing, if you can't do anything else when you're making a decision, I want you to ask yourself if you're going to annoy the user, right? Don't do that. And then we walk up the pyramid. We want to respect their life and their story and how we're fitting into it. We want to empower them to do the things they care about. We want to delight them because we want them to love our apps. And at the very top, if you can reach it, you want to help them connect to the people they love and the issues they care about and the places they miss. OK, so let's go through these one by one. Don't annoy the user. So why don't you want to annoy the user? First of all, starting in Jelly Bean, we started giving them more and more tools to push back against this sort of flood of attention-grabbing information. And so one thing they can do in Jelly Bean and on is they can block your notifications. And you will not know. We don't tell you that your notifications are blocked. You're just sort of banned, and they just go into the ether. So this is, in some ways, depending on how your app is structured and what your app is doing, you're kind of dead at this point. You have no way to get back to the user. So you should be thinking, whenever you make a decision, whenever your product manager says, we got to do this thing, I want you to have this in your head, that you could get banned. If the user doesn't know how to ban you, or they just don't feel like doing it, or you haven't created a value proposition, the other thing they can do, of course, that every user knows how to do is uninstall you. So let's watch this poor little ice cream guy. There he is, my app, it's happy. No, don't do it. No, don't do it. Ah. Okay, so I want you to keep, let's just watch that one more time. This is a wash over us. Let's just watch it go. There it goes. It's your app. It's gone. Okay, so don't annoy the user. If you didn't have motivation before, hopefully you do now. This is a base thing. So this is so important that, of course, we try to help you with this. So one of the things we do in Lollipop and on is we have a mode called Do Not Disturb. So you don't know, as the app, you don't know my story. You don't know if you're going to be interrupting me in something that I care about. But I can give the system signals. I can say, listen, I do not want to be bothered by unimportant things for the next hour. And what will happen from the app perspective is that your notification won't interrupt the user. It'll still be posted. It'll still show up in the shade. It's not like being banned. It'll still be there. But you have to know that this might happen, so that the notification might get posted and might not have made the noise you wanted it to make, for example. And that's a good thing, because if you'd made the noise at the wrong time, you would have annoyed the user, right? So what do you need to know as the developers about this? This is what the system does, right? The user has a lot of ways to control this. They can say, because all the information channels that users use are, as I said, they're evolving fast, right? They're changing rapidly. So they're kind of idiomatic. Some people still rely on phone calls a lot. Some people use SMSs. There's a lot of variability there. So the user is able to control this by sort of a channel basis. And as the developer, you need to tell us what channel you fit in. So this is going to be my go-to code snippet. We're going to be modifying this all through the talk. I made it nice and big so you could read it. And I'm using, so this is the builder pattern. Are you all using the builder pattern? Yes, builder pattern. You should be using the builder pattern because that makes sure that we have all the information we need to treat your notification correctly. And this is all about getting the notification to the right place. So this is the builder pattern. Very basic, obviously. You get some icon, text, title, and you build it, and you get a notification. I will try to use notification compat everywhere in the sample. Sometimes it doesn't fit on the screen. But if you're using the builder, you should be using the compat builder, because this will at least compile and run all the way back to 4. I don't know if there's anybody targeting 4 anymore. But so for all intents and purposes, all Androids, right? So it will fall, for features that don't exist, it will fall back gracefully. And then you don't have to worry about it, so that's nice. So we do that for you. So here's the meat of the thing. So for category, very simple. There's a builder method that you set the category, and you just have to pick the right one. That's the hard part. So here's some categories. So these are the ones that relate to the screen I showed you before, the ones that the user right now has direct control over. So alarms, reminders, events, messages, calls. You'll notice that they're pretty tightly defined. So alarms are like alarm clocks, the thing that wakes you up in the morning. So you have to think again about what is the user going to expect when they say they want to be interrupted by alarms. And make sure that you're not going to surprise them when you tell us that it's an alarm. Okay, and one of the most subtle ones, I think, is this category message, which sounds pretty generic, like a message, okay? But this particularly means synchronous messages. So SMSs, instant messages, things like that. On the next page, there is email, which is asynchronous messages. So email, we wouldn't necessarily consider that a synchronous message. And social updates, for example, that are undirected, like not a mention of me, but like just I posted a thing, that's usually not sort of a notification event. And then this last one that I put up here, there are a whole bunch of other recommendations in the API docs, categories in the API docs. The recommendation one I put up here in particular because if you're doing development for TV, then you're already using this to get recommendations into the recommendation bar. And there's no reason you shouldn't do that on the phone as well. If you're going to post something that's recommendation-ish, put the category on it. OK. So you may have noticed, the sharp eye may have noticed that there were little icons. Those aren't just my reminders, although they do help me. What I'll try to do in the rest of the talk is I'll highlight everything with the version on which it will work. So remember, if you use the compat library, it'll run, but it'll actually exist on these devices. So a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about are Lollipop, and right now this is relatively fresh data. It's about a quarter of the devices out there that we're seeing. And then many of the other things we're talking about will be Jelly Bean and on, which is at this point a huge fraction. And then if it's relevant to all devices, mostly those are sort of policy things, like when should you post things. I'll mark it with the Droid. So keep your eye out for those little icons if you're wondering, like, am I targeting the thing and well, this is useful for me? That's how you know. Okay, so on to the next chapter, respecting the user. So let's see. So there's one of the main features you can set in the builder is something called priority. And that sounds pretty good. People usually think of priority as where I am in the list. And often I imagine that people want to be toward the top of the list. But priority is about a lot more than just where you are on the list. So you'll notice at the bottom here, there's this thing priority min, which actually gets sort of a different visual treatment. So in this case, it's a little bit gray. It's sort of de-emphasized. These have implications about how the user is going to end up being interrupted. And so we should run through a couple of those and try to understand them. So again, trying not to disturb the user or annoy the user. One thing you should do is use things like priority low or priority min. And this is how you set them. Set priority, and there's an enum or a constant. And the reason you should not always want to get in the user's face is because you may have information that's useful to them at some point in the future. But you don't know when to post it to them. And there have been some studies. You can look in the academic research. I think there was one. I can't remember the reference right now. Anyway, if you look for them, you'll find the studies that show that people are more receptive to notifications that they get at the right time. So this is a way for you to sort of do that on the cheap, right? You post them in the low priority bin so that they aren't grabbing attention, but the user will see them when it's time. So here's an example of my lock screen, for example. There's a chat message from Mike, and it looks like I have one notification. It turns out that I actually have two notifications. I have this file upload notification, and that was something that the app decided wasn't enough to like bother me about, right? So this is another way that the presentation is keyed to priority. So if you post a min priority notification, what you're saying is, don't bother the user. If they go looking in the shade, you can present it to them, because then they're probably bored and might be picking up something. But we don't put it on the lock screen because it's not important enough to like bother you while you're on your way somewhere else. But the missed instant message, yeah, I might want to know about that. I want to know I missed it. So another place that minimum priority notifications don't show up is at the top here. So you'll notice the status bar has one chat icon. There is no file upload icon, right? So this is another way that while the user's on their way somewhere else, you don't necessarily want to bother them with this update that maybe not critical. Another way to get the user the information they need is to use this thing called set only alert once. I don't know if anybody's used that. Yeah? So okay, so you should be using this. So this is a situation where, again, it's not an instant message notification. It's not one that I'm going to like, I hear the beep and I pull my phone out and look at it right away. It might be something like, what's the weather? Or what's the latest stock quote? Or how far away is something? Those are the kinds of things where you're not going to alert the user. You don't have any timely information to give them, but you have information they might be able to take advantage of if they happen to see it. And this is a way, if, for example, you did want to alert them that you were posting it, but you didn't want to keep bothering them while you were updating it, you can update it in the background. So set only alert once says, don't make noise again. If you've already made noise, don't do it again. And then the system tracks that, because that's something that would be difficult for you to track. This is another way we're helping you. OK. So one of my so this instant message we keep seeing. A lot of the notifications you're going to see on my screenshots are from an example app, and I have a link to the code at the end. And Mike Claren is my director. So I have in the past scared myself. So I'll be working on something and I'll forget, and I'll run the test app and I'll look at it and I'll go home and I'll come back the next day and I'll be like, oh my gosh, Mike, I missed a thing from Mike, or I missed a call from whoever, or whatever. Okay, so there's this notion of stale notifications. When we go talk to people, we see, they'll pull down their shade and there'll be like 10 notifications from this app. The most recent of which was useful, but the other ones are totally not. So this is very easy, you should just cancel them out, right? If you think that you've posted information that the user isn't going to care about an hour from now, don't show it to them, right? Get out of their face. Their attention is worth more than your extra effort for coding, right? So you can do them that favor and they will appreciate it. So that's one thing you can do. So this is the alarm service. It's again existed back from the beginning of Android. And so in this case, I would craft this little pending intent, which in this instance, the code sort of indicates that it may cancel all my notifications, so I would call no man cancel all. If you want to track individual notifications, you would just make a pending intent with the ID, for example. OK. So I've been talking about how to get out of the user's way. Sometimes you do need to get in the user's way. You need to alert them. So we should talk about that a little bit. OK. So this is another situation where the system UI is helping you. So it used to be the case that if you were reading a book on Android and you got a phone call, you kind of got smacked in the face with the resulting activity, right? Like you'd be like, ah, right? So you're reading away and you're focused, and all of a sudden this phone call comes in, and the person who called you didn't know that they were going to interrupt something. Or maybe you were playing a game even, right? Like you could have been playing a game, about to get a high score, and then bah, right? So that's not good. So one thing we did in Lollipop is we introduced this idea of a peak. So there's a peaking notification. So the nice thing about this is that the user doesn't get pulled out of their task. So attention sometimes is about focus, sometimes about task. And because you don't know what task they're in, this is something the system will help you do. So in this case, in this example, the phone call comes in. The user gets a chance to maybe finish the sentence they were reading and then answer it, or ignore it, or whatever they want to do. And what we realized was that it was still an interruption if you're reading to hear the noise, even if it wasn't a phone call. Let's say it was just an instant message. So you're reading or you're playing a game and you hear, and you're like, I need to go see what that was. Like, it might have been something important. And then you go see what it was, and it turns out it wasn't anything important. So what we did is we allowed high priority notifications to bubble up into this space. So you can elect to use this space by setting your priority high. So this is another way in which priority changes the way you're presented. And making sound. So we could have, in fact, one of the early designs was to have a specific API where you say, I want this to be in the heads up. And instead what we did is we took this sort of implicit API because we wanted you, the developer, to make the conscious decision that you're going to annoy the user. So if you're going to make noise, right, you have to at least make noise. You can't like show up in the heads up without making noise. So you have to make that commitment that you're going to annoy the user. So you have to have that calculus in your head and say, well, this possibly could annoy the user, so I want to make sure that it's going to be appropriate. I want to make sure that they're happy about it. OK. So, and again, like if you annoy the user, like don't use the peak unless you really think it's worth it, because you will get uninstalled. So there's the poor ice cream guy. OK, so empowering the user. So we're moving up the pyramid here, so we're going to feel a little better about ourselves, right? So one of the things that you need to do is to make sure notifications are supposed to be actionable. I'm supposed to be able to take some action on them, right? If it wasn't actionable, then I can go get it. I can browse it later, right? But if I need to know and take action on it, then it makes sense as a notification. And my kid already understands this. The tablet was out. There were notifications. I was like, hey, how do you feel about notifications? It's kind of a weird home life, maybe. And the response was, some of them are annoying. I was like, oh, why? Oh, well, I can't do anything with them, right? So you're not fooling anybody. Even the kids understand. And particularly in that case, there was a notification about a game. It was one of these sort of farming games, and the squash was ripe or something. And there was a notification about that, and that was actually appreciated because now it's time to go back and do something. The other notification was, oh, wouldn't you like to buy that power up? Well, of course I would. Click on the notification. Turns out you can't do that yet because you don't have enough beans or whatever it is, right? So that's not actionable. That's very clearly an ad to pull you back into the app. This one is at least, I mean, it's certainly pulling you back to the app, but at least it's doing the user a favor. And even children understand the difference between these. So definitely think about and then we had the talk. So that was when we had the talk, and we talked about how to uninstall apps and uninstalled. So how can you empower the user? So it turns out that people have different. One thing you can do that we've allowed you to do in Lollipop is to get to this long press space. If you have a notification settings activity, right, an activity where the user goes to tell you how they want the notifications to be presented. Should they make noise? Do I even want those kinds of activities? And you should have one of those. If you don't, you should. And if you do, then you can tell us, and the system will surface that in various places where the user might be looking for it, because they may not know how to get to it in your app, right? They might be in some menu or whatever, and they may not even think about it. But for example, in this case, we surface it right in the long press. So they can say, I don't like that notification, and there's a gear. And that gear will appear if you do this. So this is your manifest. You have your settings activity, which you already have. You should. And you just add this category. So notification preference category. And we'll go look those up. And wherever they make sense to surface, we'll show them to the user. And that'll take them directly deep into your app, and then they can do all the stuff. So another thing, actually, a friend of mine found out I was giving this talk, and he asked me to tell you one thing, which is that if you have a settings activity for your notifications, which you should, and the user expresses some desire about how notifications should be handled, please save that. Like, don't drop it on the next upgrade. Don't move it between devices. You should definitely send it to your server or something. And I think the key idea there is that anytime the user tells you or gives you some information about how they like or dislike your app, that's gold, right? You're never going to get that again. They're never going to tell you again, right? So any chance you get where they give you their preferences, you should definitely treat those as something to save and cherish and back it up and restore it and make sure it's still there. OK. So if you don't have a settings activity for your notifications, and you should, this is how it looks. So it turns out it's really easy. I told you I was climbing the same mountain as you. Actually, I had never written a preference pair, so I learned this for the talk. But you got some XMLs, checkbox preference. So this in particular controls my example app, do I want my example SMS to make noise or not. So this is sort of what the XML looks like. And then very simply, you just pull it out of preferences, and if it's not true, you don't set the sound, right? So that's pretty easy. So we should be doing this, definitely. OK, the other way to empower the users is to, like I said, they should be notifications should be actionable. So obviously, you should add actions to them. So actions are this way to add more than one intent to a notification. So normally, you would click on the notification. It would fire an intent. Usually, that just opens your app and drops you in the appropriate context to see the thing. But sometimes, the user might be able to make a decision from the shade. And that, from the user perspective, that's much better, right? So in this case, an incoming call, I can add an action button that lets me drop the call, right? And now imagine that this is in the peak. It slid down. I'm playing a game or something. I don't want to talk to that person. Ignore. I didn't even have to leave the game, right? So if I had to click on the notification, go into the phone app, and now I'm in a different context, and I've lost my sort of mental space back there, I have to go back to it. So this is something you definitely do for the users to give them more choices and give them more actionable notifications. And this is how you add them. This is actually, I think, the deprecated call, but it fits on the slide. So if you try to do this, it'll tell you to do something else slightly different. But the basics are the same. You give us a small icon, you give us a very tiny string, and the pending intent that you want to fire. And often that pending intent will go to a service, right? It won't actually start an activity. It'll go to a service that'll say drop the call, for example. And the thing you should think about is that the more actions you add, the smaller the buttons get. So if what might look good in your language, if you internationalize it, it might not fit. So this is a very limited space. So you have to sort of craft those messages and think about exactly what the actions are. Another way to make notifications actionable is to give the user the information they need. So instead of, you'll never guess what Roman posted, show the picture, right? That's the main body of this message. So the user should be able to see it and take action on it right there. And I think this is about building trust, right? Like the user, if you don't always pull the user into your app to perform every action, then the user is going to trust that when you do pull them into the app, that it's for a good reason, and they're going to have a better experience. And this is also, there's a style builder that started in Jelly Bean. So you would build again, using the builder pattern, you would build your notification, and that would render as a small regular notification. And then if you wanted to have an expandable version, then you attach a style. So in this case, there's a picture style that it just wraps the bitmap. And then there's a text example, the same sort of thing. You can wrap the text example. And this is, again, it's just sensible, right? Like, I'll be there. I have to click on it, right? OK, instead, I can pull it open and be, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Oh, great. OK, that's fantastic. So giving the user the information they need when they need it so they can make sort of live their life and tell their story is a good way to make the user happy with you. OK, so this is another little story. So how many people use Google Calendar? A lot of people. I saw when I was sitting back there and I saw people with it open. How many people have been using it long enough that you remember when it used to stack up notifications? Like you'd have your next meeting and your current meeting and like all the previous meetings. So now if you have, this is a case where, this is I'm not really going to talk about multi-device very much, but this is the one time we're talking about multi-device. It is the case that some of your users will have a phone and maybe a tablet. And so my experience was that I would have my phone at work and I'd go to all my meetings and dismiss them. And then when I got home, I got like a little memoir of all my meetings, right, sitting on my tablet. And I'm like, great, I was there, thank you. So this is something, one of the advantages of working at Google is I get to like paratroop into, say, the calendar team and help them out by building this global dismissal. So this is 2 devices. I get a calendar notification independently on each one. I dismiss it on the right one, and the left one auto-dismisses it. So this is about, remember I said every user action is sort of precious. You want to really value those interactions. And this is a case of making the most of that interaction. I told you I was done with it, so there's no reason to show it elsewhere. And OK, so this is multi-device. It's getting a little complicated. But if you're already creating this problem, you almost certainly have a server that's causing these events to come out. And probably you're using GCM. So if you're already doing that, then the flow is pretty simple. The server, there's some event happens. Somebody creates a calendar event. It sends information out to the 2 devices. They post notifications. You catch the dismiss intent. So you know how to set I'll show you in a second how you set a dismiss pending intent. So the person dismisses the intent. The application gets that callback. It sends a GCM message to the server and says, hey, it's dismissed. And the server says, oh, well, I should send that out to all the rest of them. So it sends it to all the other devices again. And the phone says, I already got it. But the tablet's like, oh, that's good information. I'll cancel that notification so the user doesn't have to worry about it. OK, so this is how you do it. So in your GCM, again, if you're creating this problem, you're probably already using GCM. In your GCM handlers, you just add a clause that says you have to come up with some API for yourself. But post sounds like a good one. And the key bit of information here is that the post message from the server will include some sort of unique ID. You heard about this in the previous talk, where you have the server managing these unique IDs, so you can refer to things. So this is the same thing. The server is going to send down a unique ID so that all the devices agree. And then the devices independently are going to create these delete intents. So this is basically a pending intent wrapper around this unique ID. And then it's going to post the notification. OK, so when the notification is dismissed, there'll be some intent service you have. And the pending intent will fire into that service. And you'll have a dismiss action. And you pull out that unique ID, because now you have it back in your hand, right? You don't really have to save it anywhere. It's sort of as part of the state. OK, so then you build your message and send it off. Again, if you're using GCM, there's more stuff around this, but you probably already have it. So this is just a couple lines to add. And then, again, back in the receiver, we already have our post receiver. We're just going to add a cancel receiver. And again, we'll get the unique ID. In this very simple sample, we're using the ID as the notification ID. So I can just call directly into Nomad and say, cancel that. You can imagine a situation where you do a lookup and match keys or something more complicated. OK. So the last thing in this section is about ongoing notifications. So ongoing notifications are these things that you cannot dismiss, right? You sort of swipe them, and they're stuck there. And this sounds like a great idea, right? Like I can pin something to the top and make it undismissible, and then I've always got that spot. It turns out that this really annoys users. So there are, how many do we hear, like 1.4 billion users? A lot of them are not like you. And they use their phones in ways that you would never have predicted. And so there's a lot of different workflows that people use in the shade. And one of them, for example, is to just deal with the top thing. You deal with it, get rid of it, deal with it, get rid of it. And the nice thing is that the next one pops up automatically, and you get the action buttons out and the full view, right? So in some sense, the notifications aren't actionable until they pop up at the top in that workflow. Now, you can always open them. But if you've taken that top spot with an undismissible thing, suddenly their workflow is totally broken. Yes, they can pinch the things open and do the stuff, but you've interrupted their workflow, and nobody likes that, right? So you got to think really hard about sticking something at the top. And there's certain cases where you have to do it. If you're starting a foreground service, you have to put one up there because we'll kill your service if you don't. Things where there is an external obligation, like another person who's waiting for me, that's an ongoing event. That's not an ongoing event in your app. It's not an ongoing event in the phone. It's an ongoing event in real life. So that makes sense to make that an ongoing, because the risk of dropping that, losing it, like accidentally swiping it away and not being able to get back to it before the other person gets bored and goes away, is very high. But for almost everything else, you should prefer a model where you can, instead of making it ongoing, say, oh, I don't care about this now, snooze, and then post an alarm for yourself, and if it is that important, post it again later. 10 minutes from now, an hour from now, whatever makes sense. The other thing you can do is, if you, for whatever, really believe that you need to have an ongoing notification stuck in the shade, is either make it lower priority or give them a way to bump the priority down. So here's some examples of ongoing notifications that sort of do the right thing. They give the user an actionable way to get rid of the notification. So the top one is a music playing app. I think it's Google Music. And you notice that while it's playing, you can't dismiss it. But the user can, once they pause it, then they can dismiss it. So this is a nice pattern, right? The user, they know why it's stuck there. Oh, yeah, OK. And then the bottom one is very explicit. This is ConnectBot. Anybody? It's an SSH client. OK, it very explicitly says the way you get rid of this is to disconnect the session. OK, so you should do that kind of stuff. Or get removed. People will definitely remove you if you annoy them. OK. So delighting the user. So delighting the user, this is a tough chapter, because once you get up the pyramid, it's like, it really depends on what your app does, right? How are you going to make your users happy is kind of like what you're doing, right? That's sort of your thing. But I do have one specific thing to say about this that I've seen by talking to people. A lot of people turn off sound on their phone always. That's one thing to know. And they just live on vibrate. Other people have sound on. And for those people, a lot of them really love sound. And they will love to change ringtones, right? They love to have this app be that sound and this app be that sound, and that way they can know, right? So when their phone makes noise, they know if it's, sometimes they even know it's that person, because there's a person who uses that app and nobody else uses it, right? So this is another thing I actually learned while I was setting up the talk. So back in our notification settings, right? Remember we were here, so we can get to your settings app. It turns out that there's this ringtone preference. Has anybody used this? It goes all the way back to 1. There we go. So you would think, so when you look at the notification APIs, it just says, give us a URI, right? And you're like, where am I going to get a URI for a song? Well, it turns out you get it from here. So if you just drop this little snippet into your preferences panel, you'll get this nice little dialogue. You don't have to do anything else. They get to pick. You say, please give me notification ringtones. Those are the short ones. So it'll pre-filter everything for you. They pick one. When it's time to make noise, you just ask the preference manager, hey, give me that string I asked for. And it comes out as a string URI, and you parse it and pass it in. Done. Like, you don't even have to know about songs. You don't have to know about MP3s or whatever. Just that's it. So this is surprising to me that it was so simple, because it's something that people love so much, and often you don't see it in apps. So if you want to delight your users, in addition to everything else you're doing, right, this is another thing you can add on. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is this very tippy top. So I'm particularly interested in people. I think people are particularly important to us. And so in the system, we built a way for you to help connect people, right? So, so one thing that happens now, one thing that's changed in our society, is that this device is the way that people get in touch with me, right? But it's also the way that everybody gets in touch with me, right? So that's the problem. It's the way that games get in touch with me. It's the way that politicians get in touch with me. It's the way my mom gets in touch with me. And one of those I care about, right? And it's my mom. So I can't turn this phone off. I cannot turn it off. Like, people say, oh, I'll just turn my phone off and then I can sleep. I can't do that. Aha. I can't do that, because what if my mom called me in the middle of the night? Like, it would be important, right? I would want to get that call. So I can't turn it off. I can't turn the volume off. What do I do? what I do is I go back to do not disturb mode. And I don't know if you saw it last time. So this is my phone. Every night from 10 to 7 in the morning, I'm in priority only mode. And the way I have it set up is you can, I don't know if you noticed this before, I didn't mention it, but in some of these categories, you can actually select what kind of people you want to hear from. Anyone? Do I want all calls? Or do I only want calls from people I know? Or do I only want calls from people I've starred? So stars are things that this system has taught people to do, because that's how you get people into your quick dial list, right? So people usually somehow figure that out. They're like, how do I get that in the quick dial list? And somebody teaches them how to star. So I use stars. And what this allows us to do is that now my phone will not make noise unless it's from somebody I care about. So that means I have the peace of mind that I'm not going to miss something, but I also get interrupted when it's important to me. So my attention is properly focused. So you have to help us. So there's 3 parties involved in this grand scheme. There's the user, right, the person who knows which people are important to them, and they only know that. There's you, the app developers, right, who know what this event is about. And then there's us, the system, which knows what state the user's in, like are we in do not disturb or not, right? And so you need to help us by giving us information again. So you need to annotate your notifications with the appropriate metadata that tells us about the people. And we tried to make this as easy as possible. So we gave you lots of different ways. We accept many different kinds of URIs. So at the most simplest level, if you use telephone numbers as an identifier, which people do, just give us that. That's it. So if the person is important to me, it is almost certainly the case that their phone number ended up in my contacts somehow. Right? You may not have put it there, but somebody did. Maybe I did. So if that's all you have, don't ask for contacts permission. Just give us that, and we'll check it. And it doesn't hurt to add it. If that person's not in contacts, it won't do anything. Right? It doesn't matter. And then also the same thing. If you have an email address, you can do that. So if you send us a mail to URI, we'll see that. We'll say, oh, I wonder if that email address is one we know about. We'll look it up. OK. And the last one is more complicated. So if you're already dealing with the contacts database for some reason, if you're a social app and you're doing contact syncing or whatever, you already have tons of code for the contacts manager, right? So this is a highly abbreviated sample because otherwise it would be like 5 slides. But the key bits here are when you go to do a lookup on a contact, you have to ask for this thing called the lookup key. And that's something you normally wouldn't have pulled out. And once you have it, then you hand the ID and the lookup key to this static function called getLookupURI, and that builds a URI for you. And then you hand us that. And the reason you want to do that is because the lookup URI is more stable to certain kinds of rearrangements of the contacts database. So things might be moving around in the contacts database. You want to make sure that you give us a URI that will actually get back to the right person in a stable way. So there's all those ways to tell us about people. OK, so just to recap. Every single time you write the code notificationmanager.notify, I want you to think, is the user going to be happy about this, or am I going to annoy them? And if I annoy them too much, how long is it be before they ban or install me? OK, and that's like the first thing. But then, really, you got to be thinking about how, when they installed your app on their phone, they're sort of inviting you into their pocket. You're sharing their life. And you have to sort of be respectful of that. And you have to think about, well, how am I going to fit into this story? And you have to give us the information we need to help you do that, because there are things that you can't do, like the categories and the people. And then I want you to make sure that you're empowering the user. Like, no, please don't post, you'll never guess what weird I am your friend just sent you, right? Don't do that, right? Tell them the information they need, give them the actions they need, and you'll build trust, and you'll build happiness, and then you'll have happy users, and that's what we all want. And then on the delight and the actualization level, help us connect them to the user, help them connect with the sounds they want. And that's it. So the source code, all the source samples were pulled from this thing called Notification Showcase, which is the worst way to get you sample code because it's part of the framework. It's like the thing that we use to test things out. I believe there is an effort afoot to make a real sample out of this. I'll be helping next week probably with that. So this link for now, you can go look at the code. And And hopefully we'll have a better story at some point in the near future. So thank you. And I talked super fast, so we have some time for questions if you have questions. I can't see because the lights are glary.
Hi, right here.
There we go. Hi.
My question has to do with what happens when the user turns off notifications for an application.
Yes, so if they ban a notification, they just don't get delivered. Basically, the notification manager will drop them on the floor.
Right. Does GCM still deliver the notification to the phone and then the phone not show it? Or
yes.
Can I get to know at the GCM level that my push was rejected?
So if you're using the GCM library to post your notifications for you, they'll still get dropped on the floor. GCM won't know either, because GCM is kind of inside your package, so it doesn't know anything more than you do.
No, but if it's sent from my server, will my server get some kind of...
Right, so my understanding, maybe we should follow up afterwards, but my understanding of it is that the GCM thing is a library within your package. So that's actually doing the posting of the notifications. Like, they don't get posted by Play Services, they get posted by you. And so I think there's no information there. I don't think GCM would be able to know.
I'm specifically asking about notifications that my backend will send to the device using GCM.
Oh, I see. So the user doesn't know about those. That's not a user feature, so they wouldn't block those. We're aliasing the term notification. So the message that comes from GCM is a back-end thing. The user has no sort of visibility into that at all.
Okay.
Really, notification blocking is about the UI in the shade, whether it shows up in the shade.
Thank you.
There's one back here, I think. I can sort of see it.
Thank you. Do you have any best practices for the watch notifications? Does it work any different? Watch.
The watch. Oh, yes. Yes, I had some slides on that, and I ended up taking them out because I thought I was going to be over time. So there's a couple things about that. I think a lot of the same principles apply, right? If you're wearing a watch, you know that the vibration is pretty, you can't ignore it. So it's an even more grabby sort of way to interrupt someone. So you should be thinking extra hard about whether you're going to annoy them. But you should already be thinking about that anyway, because some devices are louder than others, and you don't really know how annoying it's going to be. The one extra bit is that there's this set local only flag on the builder that if for whatever reason you're generating notifications kind of trapped in the device, like it's about the device maybe, and there's no reason to send it to the watch, like USB connected, for example. That's a great one, right? And you plug it in, you don't want to see that on your watch. So you call set local only true, and then it won't get bridged to the watch. That's your way to sort of keep it from getting to the watch.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's one in the middle.
Yeah, so I saw one of the things you showed examples of setting the priority to the minimum or lower priority.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
I can hear you, but the live stream won't.
Do you mind repeating that?
So, put it this.
So I noticed you mentioned trying to take advantage of setting the priority to something like minimum or low,
Right.
which wouldn't necessarily annoy users.
Right.
Would that end up leading to lower click-through rates? But on the other side,
that's a very
then
good
you wouldn't
question.
get your app uninstalled.
Right,
Is
right.
that sort of the trade-off?
Okay, so I don't think so, because, well, like I mentioned, there was some academic research, and I'm blanking. There was a paper by Nuria Oliver out of the Spanish telecom company that was recently at a conference about this exact. And I think that's the trade-off you're assuming is that I'll lower my click-through rates versus annoyance, right? That those things aren't linked. It turns out that if you present the notifications at the right time, you actually get a higher click-through rate. So, and this makes sense. If you do this sort of mental experiment, if I'm driving down the road and my phone tries to tell me to read an article, I'm not going to do it, right? But if I'm sitting in the doctor's office waiting, right, and I'm bored, oh, an article, yeah, I'll totally read that, right? So you can totally imagine how that would play out in real life. So I don't think they're not on a seesaw. They're unrelated. So I think it really depends on what kind of content you're posting and exactly what the interaction is going to be, and you really need to think about it. But it might be the case that if you stick it in the shade without drawing attention to it, that they'll just find it at the right time. The time that's right for them, when they pull down the shade and are just sort of triaging. That might be your golden moment, right? So. Okay, I think we're, oh, we got one more, last one.
Okay, yeah, hopefully this will be quick. Basically, I'm wondering why not tell developers that their notifications are being blocked by a user. So basically, like, user turns off my notifications. I might want to know because maybe I need that feedback that I'm actually
Right. Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. So how do you know if you're annoying the users before you get blocked? I think the reason we don't close that loop is we're worried about sort of retribution or whatever. We don't want to. Obviously, you're having a bad time, you and the user. We don't want to get in the middle of that. But I think there's signals you could get before that happened, right? You can post delete intents. You can post, of course, when they launch your other intents. And I think if you are clever about watching how soon they react to your notifications and things like that, you can get some soft engagement numbers before the bad stuff happens. Right. Yep. All right, thank you very much. I'll be around for office hours.